Hi, my name is Reid. Thanks for tuning in to this edition of the Introduction to LogicLab, and this specific installment is going to be how LogicLab can work for specific media properties. So I'd like to start a little bit about our background and our parent company. So LogicLab is a division of a company called Merkle. Merkle is a 20-year-old database management company who now has evolved into a full-scale CRM solution. There was a relationship that Merkle had with a big national advertiser where the national advertiser was enjoying the fruits of a direct marketing relationship when they essentially tasked Merkle with identifying a way to apply the core competencies of direct marketing to mass media. So conceptually, LogicLab really is a CRM solution in the mass media space. Our relationship to our parent company is important for a number of reasons, but one of the primary reasons is that Merkle houses a gigantic national consumer database that has 275 million records of adults in the United States, and that's roughly indicative of 98% of the adult population. By aggregating a lot of different data, we've been able to attach essentially 1,500 demographic, psychographic, and geographic variables to each of these individual records. And really what that allows you to do as an advertiser or a media company is understand from a much more holistic standpoint the people in your database, whoever they may represent. So it's very crucial to the way LogicLab does business to have access to this national consumer database. The other reason our partnership with our parent company Merkle is so crucial to LogicLab is that Merkle houses the databases of many, many large iconic brands in the United States. And by proxy, LogicLab gets exposure to those national advertisers because Merkle is kind enough to bring us into a lot of those relationships as an extension to their integrated media optimization solution. And LogicLab essentially represents something called media vehicle optimization. So LogicLab can be sold as a component to IMO, which is the integrated media optimization, or it can be sold in a modular solution known as media vehicle optimization. So LogicLab has two components. When it functions within the Merkle solution, it's part of an IMO strategy. When it functions outside of the Merkle solution, it really functions as an MVO. So when we can tie all this information together, the access to these big Fortune 1000 companies and this big national consumer database, really the impetus for what LogicLab is doing is trying to matchmake, essentially, between big advertiser customer databases and media databases, subscriber files or viewer files or audience files, what have you. And so you can kind of think of it in terms of a clock. So at the center of this clock is our national consumer database. And that national consumer database we use to fuel a lot of the analysis that we're going to be doing on the customer data from the advertisers and the audience data from the media companies. And really the way we use this national consumer database is we backfill a lot of demographic information that I was referring to earlier, that some geographic and some psychographic, onto these names and addresses on both sides of this equation. So we have the first and last name and the address of a person within the customer database, and we have all the people in some sort of subscriber file for a specific media property. And the way this really works is we create a unique demographic thumbprint of the representative of the media property based on this backfilling analysis of this demo and geo and psycho information. And we then score this information against every individual in this customer database. And really the output is going to be a ranked media evaluation at the media property level with the highest affinity to whatever the customer data is. And this customer data could be in the form of segmentation, some sort of enterprise segmentation based on profitability. It could be general customer data that you want to just get a sense of the overall media affinity to an entire customer database. Really any way you see your business strategy being executed, we're just trying to carry forward business strategy. So when you go through and you do your enterprise segmentation, or you kind of evolve into your media mix optimization, in the current state, when you start thinking about the way media is bought and sold, it's really relegated to demographics. So although you've gone through a lot of trouble to identify who your most profitable customers are, engaging them is still relatively difficult because of these generalities that demographics and personas yield. So what LogicLab is trying to do is connect these two sets of data and allow advertisers ultimately to carry forward their business strategy into their media planning and execution strategies. How this really works for you is, as a media property in this state, what we call the then state, it's tough for you to go out logistically and ultimately to have a sales force large enough to represent the entire vertical advertising horizon. Media properties such as yourselves are out trying to raise revenue by selling ad pages and convince ultimately advertisers that you bring value. So you're trying to articulate your own value based on whatever you might use. You may use some syndicated research. You may, have panel surveys. However you articulate your specific audience composition, and ultimately however you try and connect the dots between yourselves and advertisers you're out pitching. It's difficult, it's time consuming, and you employ a lot of people to exercise this strategy. Utilizing LogicLab, what we'd like to propose is live in our system. So have your data live in our system in an analytics capacity, and ultimately advertisers are going to input their segmentation, and we're going to produce for them this ranked media affinity, and your property will live there. And ultimately, when the advertiser goes through this exercise and sees this quantifiable connection between their customer and your audience, ultimately they're going to come to you as a complete and essentially a completely turning on its side this system whereby you're going out and finding these advertisers yourselves. We're really trying to introduce them to you within this system and outside the tasking of your own sales and marketing efforts. So to kind of recap what we've covered here is that LogicLab, we're a division of Merkle, and that relationship is important on a number of levels. First, because it gives us access to this really big and well-developed national consumer database. Our relationship with Merkle is also important because of the exposure to a lot of their relationships, and obviously LogicLab is outselling themselves as this modularized solution as well, but it's nice when you have the relationships built into the system. Ultimately, what that means for you as a media property is we're going to connect their data, the client-side data, to your audience data and start articulating a quantifiable affinity between the two data sets. That means that, at least to some degree, your own sales and marketing efforts will have an adjunct component helping them drive business by living in our system and ultimately introducing advertisers to your data, and ultimately then the advertiser coming to you with some sort of quantifiable understanding of the affinity between your two data sets. So we're not saying we're the total solution, but we're definitely a solution to help drive revenue your way. And again, this all happens in a system where your data lives outside the tasking of your own sales and marketing efforts. LogicLab offers a pay-per-performance model, so LogicLab collects a small percentage of any gross media buys that happen as a result of our analytics, our analytic recommendation. So to live in our system is free. Come in, try and experience it, see what kind of revenue we can generate for you. We look forward to hearing from you. I'm Reid at LogicLab. Have a great day.